Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are in the midst of exploring Dao De Jing. I have to work at pronouncing it every time. And folks, what we're doing is that I don't know anything about this. Okay, I'm just trying to learn. I have read it many, many times so far. I've listened to it a couple of times. So all of us are students here. Okay, we are all, and the entire philosophy is about being student of nature, of the ways of nature. That's what it is all about. And so we are all learning here, and we are simply going to talk about what we are learning, and we are going to learn from each other. That's the idea. Okay, so I'm planning a whole series of meetups on this, at least a dozen meetups. So today, in the middle of it, so we're going to start by talking about our impressions of Dao, a standing invitation to everybody. You can read any one poem of the from the 81 poems, anything that you like, any translation, and speak about it a little bit if you want, or you can just read it, because there's nothing like actually having the flavor of the work in the meetup itself. So you're welcome to do that at any point of time. So today we are deliberately starting slow. You know, Mike was good enough to work with me at an improvised presentation of Art of Learning, which was a very kind of soft launch of it. Yesterday we had another one. Today we have another one. And this is going to be very interactive, and we're going to keep building it up. So Jean's friend, Dr. Wang, is going to be presenting next Monday. He's been, he's a scholar. He's been studying Dao De Jing for a long, long time, and he will be doing an introduction to it. And then at the end of the month, Yasuhiko would be here, who has translated this work. But in the middle, we are going to do many, many, many different things. And I'm open to suggestions. We'll come up with different ideas. So it's all about living this. The beautiful thing is that this work is very short. And for example, Brian and Mike recommended a Wayne Dyer translation to me and to everybody. And so I wanted to check it out. I got it on Kindle, and there's also a YouTube version of it where Wayne Dyer reads it. It's only about an hour. So I listened to it today, and it's amazing. It's amazing. So one recommendation I have is what Wayne Dyer did was he took like 10 different translations and then put it in his own words. And I encourage you to do that. You know, you should write this book. Okay, you should take in everything for each of the poems, as many translations as you want, and then put it in your own words. Writing is very, very powerful. It's like an offering, it's like putting it in your own words. So I strongly encourage you to not only read, but actually write. Okay, try to capture as much as you can, and you will do it in your own way. And in so doing, and then looking at it and going back and forth between other people's take on it, you will be able to develop. So that's another big suggestion I have, because I'm a very big fan of writing. So this is a very short work. So you can definitely, by the end of the month, you can have, choose pieces that you really like and work on them. It's basically saying the same thing throughout. It's just one idea. Okay, they are just different aspects. It's just focusing on different aspects of it. So you can pick anything that you like. So we're going to deliberately come up with I'm trying to come up with a format which is very flexible, that will accommodate every way of learning. It will also accommodate people who have spent their decades studying this. I want them to get value from this, as well as people who are just beginning. It doesn't matter your level. Okay, and this is true for nature. It's like nature doesn't really care how much you know, what is your background. The more you pay attention to it, the more you try to learn, the better it is. So we're trying to structure these meetups that way, as being highly interactive. So folks, we're going to start with the work I'd put 4 different videos, but all of these things are just examples from the philosophy, the Daoism philosophy that is captured in Dao De Jing. So please go ahead, and I would like to know what you're getting from it. Any comments, any thoughts at the highest level about what you got from the videos? What are you getting from Dao right now, so far? Just go ahead, type exclamation mark, and we'll begin the conversation. And then in the middle of it, Jean is going to give a short introduction to Dao as well. So, but let's go ahead and start the conversation. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to share any take about the videos or about your impressions of the book. So just go ahead. The rules remain the same. Just go ahead and type exclamation mark when you want to speak. Keep on topic and be courteous. And what I strongly recommend, it's a very difficult thing to grasp. So please be gentle with yourself and with each other as we try to figure these things out. So we're going to start with Joe, followed by Ash. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, what I initially gotten from the video was the idea of the problems of rigid thinking and the difficulties that arise with rigid thinking, specifically how we use it as an antidote to chaos in our lives, and it brings a lot of order to our lives. But there are a lot of negative consequences as well. And in the negative consequences are that it can lead to a fixed mindset and limit our abilities to challenge ourselves and limit our ability to challenge to adapt to change, which is extremely problematic. And the Dao De Jing opposes this kind of rigid way of looking at the world and looks at water as being the supreme good, or being like water as the supreme good. It was interesting to see how the Taoist perspective, it looks at 2 different forces with as we talked about a little bit last night, with the yin and the yang, where the yang consists of, speed, productivity, remaining steadfast, and really more of looks at efficiency, where the yin is related more to the idea of remaining open to new ideas, silence, and being flexible. But it's true in our culture today, as the video had pointed out, that I found was worth mentioning, is that we do value people that stand their own ground and defend their positions and don't necessarily back down from their opinions. And this, we see this in politics and all the time. And if people were to change their position, they'd be seen as weak. So we actually tend to even say the yin aspects of things are, while you're receiving opposing opinions and analyzing them and being more flexible, it is looked down upon. But this has a huge impact on our ability to grow. And there was a quote actually that by Jordan Peterson was interesting, that there are 2, you can see so many parallels between Jordan Peterson, what he's talking about with order and chaos, and Josh Weskin. Weskin, am I saying that name right? Anyway, regardless. You could see the parallels are very strong. I mean, even Jordan Peterson, he says, order is not enough. You can't just be stable and secure and unchanging, because there are still vital and important new things to be learned. And that's the idea of this rigid mindset that's problematic when you're unwilling to change, you're unwilling to learn. But think about how that impacts the idea of a fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And I also really like the idea just how the analogy of water itself and how adaptable it is. If you think about it and how the resilience that comes along with it, if it's cold out, it freezes. If it's warm out, it evaporates. And you pour it into a glass, it becomes the glass. That's the best part about what Bruce Lee was, and his daughter has written a really nice book that was a follow-on book about Be Like Water. But ultimately, the need for adaptability is really critical in today's world. And we kind of see this all the time. I mean, if you think about the ways of like automation and the way things are changing, I can give plenty of examples of my friends that went to law school and automation has changed what they do. And where, you have to be adaptable, and where you spent 7 years going to school, and now that's all of a sudden wiped out. Or even how and if you're going to be rigid and not adapt, well, then you'll break like a dead branch. I also think the power of softness was a very important point that's worth speaking about. I don't want to go on too much longer, but the idea of the importance of silver lining is also an important part about it, because the silver lining aspect of it was, if you don't have a lot of money, then you're not necessarily going to have a lot of the negative things that come with money. Or even if you're not attractive, you're not necessarily going to have relationships for the wrong reasons. It's amazing because some situations don't change, and you have to look at the silver lining, and that is being flexible, and it leads to a better life. I don't mean to discount that people's situations that they're in or the experiences that they're having, but it shows you that if you're resistant versus flexible, that you're basically not going to have you're not going to be able to adapt to your lifestyle. And I mean, that's just the truth. The last part, I actually, this was the idea of the growth mindset was from The Art of Learning. It said growth comes at the point of resistance. We learn by pushing ourselves and finding what really lies at the outer reaches of our abilities. And the reason that was such a great quote, you can only do that by being like water and being flexible. You cannot do that by being rigid and having a fixed mindset. Otherwise, you don't grow. So that's what I took away from it.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Franklin had a great suggestion in the chat, and I wholeheartedly support that. Is not only translate but also draw, also illustrate. Try to visualize what is being said. I mean, I do that naturally. I would do that first before writing, so basically, it's a way of kind of establishing this kind of a loop between your mind grasping something, putting it out there, and seeing whether you have grasped what you have done that. And you can do that both in words and in diagrams or illustrations. So I encourage you to do that. Next up is going to be Ash, Roshan, Laura, and Alex. Ash.
Yeah, so Leonardo would approve of that, illustrating and putting into words. So I agree with that as well. So yeah, I was telling somebody about these meetups who wasn't familiar at all with the Dao De Jing, and they asked me what it was about, like to summarize it for them. So I was trying to get it down to a sentence, and I got it down to 5 words, which were being or living in harmony with nature. So to me, that's kind of like the essentialized way that I hold the fundamental principle of the Tao. And as far as the videos went, I definitely agree with a lot of what Joe was just saying. What I mainly took from them, especially that Alan Watts video, was the idea of the passive versus the active, and the dynamics between them, how they interact. And to me, it's really interesting how, even those very basic fundamental ideas are relative to each other. They're defined in terms of one another, because there's not such a thing as activity in and of itself, or passivity in and of itself. It's from a cosmic perspective, you can be active or passive relative to something else. Yeah, I really like the way Joe put it about being rigid or resistant versus being soft or flexible. I think that's a really helpful way to think about it. And I'm thinking about getting a yin yang tattoo, so I can thank or blame you for that, Shrikant, just as a personal reminder for myself. So yeah, that's. Oh, and I also really liked the other yin video that you posted, the example that they gave of the Shawshank Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a really useful illustration about the power of the soft approach. The hard approach can bear short-term results, but in the long term, that soft, adaptable approach is going to pay off more and set you up for those moments when the hard approach can be applied effectively. So yeah, I really enjoyed all of those videos. So thank you for that, Shrikant.
Well, thank you. And that was a great way of summarizing it, kind of being and living according to nature. I think that's a very, very simple way, and that's all. That's all it is about. So in that sense, what we are trying to do is something very, very simple. And the way of how it is applicable at every moment, and this is applicable at every moment, that you need to have that flexibility. You need to be soft in order to see what is required of nature at every moment, in every context that is needed, instead of having kind of rigid ideas about what you are, what the nature is, what the situation is. You're actually listening to the nature. And if you listen to the nature enough, then you're kind of working with nature. It doesn't require that much force, because you're kind of you're finding the lines along which the nature moves, and you're moving along that. The rigid way of doing is that you have a preconception of what things need to be, and regardless of what the nature is, you're just kind of trying to push through that. So I think it's a very good way of putting it. Next up is Roshan, Laura, Alex, Donna, and Rebecca. Roshan.
Hey, yeah, I absolutely enjoyed the video. I was in the process of reading this other book, Atomic Habits, and just structuring my day and my routine. And I was always like, okay, where do I make time for my meditation and my workouts, and having to like constantly achieve that. But this kind of showed me a perspective to not be extremely rigid, but view it as it comes. So that was very interesting, and it's to me, I could relate it to Jordan Peterson with his example of Michelangelo's Marble David, where he says like there is some perfection, there is that rigid, or there is that ideal routine which I always want to be achieving, but to be rolling with the punches, to be just able to like squeeze in 1 minute if possible, if you cannot do like 1 hour workout, and just iterating continuously was something I related to as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roshan. Next up is Laura, followed by Alex. Laura, what did you get from the videos, or what have you gotten from Dao De Jing so far?
Well, I follow it, I believe it, but I also find myself being the person that was pretty rigid in the old days. And I feel myself in transition now. And so there was some dissonance for me to get through. The rigidity is still there, the need for holding on to that structure somehow. And maybe that's just the point at which I'm in my life, you know. I can't control what goes on in me, so I think I need to hold on to whatever I can. At the same time, I agree that we need that openness, that freedom to go with things and, you know, live and breathe a little bit. And so I'm very intrigued. I want to continue, but I think I have this back and forth I've got to get through. I've got to push through it like everything else. So I'm in. So that's all I can say. And I'm going to keep going.
Thank you, Laura. Next up is going to be Alex, Donna, Rebecca, and Maritza. Alex.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, watching the videos, I mean, it just struck me just how much it's not yin or yang, but it's some kind of, I think Ash said, some kind of dynamic between the two. And I was also sort of thinking, you know, trying to apply it to today. I mean, the context is very different. I mean, what is just going with it and being like water, for example? You have to be persistent as well. And isn't that an element of yang as opposed to an element of yin? Because if you just go with the flow, for example, depending on the context, you could end up with that being just you being submissive, because the easiest thing to do in the end is just to kind of conform to your circumstances. So I'm just sort of thinking about what, you know, where the break is, where the line is, how much pressure you should apply in a particular situation in order to be flexible and do, you know, thinking about the collective and the individual, do what's good for the collective without losing yourself, and also doing the right thing. I'm complicating it completely, but just thinking about that kind of, you know, that kind of dynamic element, as opposed to just saying, okay, I'm not going to be rigid, I'm going to just sort of go with it. Is that necessarily a good thing? I mean, how do things change in which, you know, in that case? That makes sense.
Alex, that's a beautiful question. And that's really the heart of the whole philosophy of how do you make that choice? And it's all about kind of clearly, you know, they're saying that both of these are needed. Both yin and yang are needed. Heaven and earth, both of them are needed. And it is all about following the Tao, which is a very definite thing. It's not like you do anything. It's like you're trying to live according to nature. And it's a very specific path. But you have to listen to nature to find out what it is. So it is a way, it's kind of the way in which these things work together. The way in which, I mean, the best summary I found in the entire book was in the chapter 25, the poem 25, where he talks about, now this is translated in various ways. You know, people follow earth, or earth serves as a model for people. The earth follows heaven, heaven follows the Tao, and Tao follows nature. So it's like, it's the way of nature which serves as a standard for what the initiating part is. The initiating part based on the Tao serves as a guide for the flowing part, and humans are kind of the children. So humans are kind of, I think of them as grandchildren of the Tao. We are like grandchildren of the Tao. And this is like your father and mother, you know, the yin and yang. So it's like, and there is a dance going on between them, but you're really trying to follow Tao by establishing some kind of a equation between. That's the best way I can understand it. But, you know, we will, as we go on, there'll be many, 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 many different answers to this question. But the question that you have asked is the right question, is the big question. So wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Next up is going to be Donna, Rebecca, Maritza, and Jean. Donna.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes, if you could speak a little bit more into the mic, that would help.
So I'm really loving this whole Tao. I really do. It just moves me so deeply. What stuck with me, which I've heard before, is that we're human beings, not human doings. I love that, because I think we get caught so much in the doing that we forget to be. We forget to be present. So I want to bring up Eckhart Tolle has an exercise where you can practice to be present. And he has you just look at a tree, just without any thoughts, and just be and look at the tree. And when you do that, at least for me, it's just so amazing. You feel that expansiveness. You feel you feel that connection with the tree, and you can feel the life in the tree. It's just so incredible. You feel that oneness with universe and source, and that's where the beauty of just being completely present. And he talks about animals too, and I've always thought this myself, is that I love watching animals because they are so present. They don't have the thoughts that get in the way. They're just so alive, so free, so, practicing the Tao. It's amazing. So this is just a wonderful topic that just expands on so many things. And the other thing that I find so interesting is that all different spiritual sources are really saying the same thing, which is beautiful and wonderful and fascinating.
Well, thank you, Donna. That's exactly the kind of awe that is needed to pursue this. And it's a personal quest for each of us, and you kind of each of us has to in order to get anything from it at all, has to feel like that from our heart, and then we can do something with it together. So thank you, Donna. Next up is going to be Rebecca, Maritza, Jean, and Jyoti. Rebecca.
Hi, it's nice to be back and
Welcome back.
thank you, and see all the familiar faces and some new ones. This was a topic when I saw come across the group I couldn't really pass up. I've been a fan of this book, which to me, growing up in a biblical family and environment has added an element that complements a lot of those teachings, I would say. And I think I've been reading this on and off for the past couple of years, and I've also been on a journey myself. Again, growing up in this fast-paced world, I've been much more yang orientated. And so I have spent the last probably 3 to 5 years focusing on the yin piece of it, and really trying to sit back and observe, do more listening, be patient, working a lot on those skills. And now I'm kind of, I don't know if the right word would be leveling up, but I'm trying to see, or I'm understanding, I guess, the value of the balance between the yin and the yang, and they're not separate. And so, I think a lot of the focus in present day, rightfully so, has been, we've talked about the Julian Jane stuff, and there's a lot of emotional IQ and just about managing emotions and putting space between triggers and reactions and all of that, which is super valuable. And now I'm almost to the point where I'm trying to understand the flow of nature and not work so hard in reacting or not reacting, and just allowing that flow of nature. You know, and when I think about the water piece, water is not controlled. It flows according to natural instinct, but it's never reactive, and nor is it passive. So like my new, what I'm trying to understand now more is that balance between the two, and really come into context with what that means versus, you know, I'm going to focus on the yin or I'm going to focus on the yang, and what do I need to work on? What I think I really need to work on, or the whole purpose behind it is the balance and the flow that comes together. And it's difficult because the whole concept is categorized with the yin and the yang. And so it's an understanding of how to dehumanize that and really get into some of those animal instincts without letting go of the human piece of us. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. I mean, the thing that really struck me about Dao De Jing was how little, that the primary focus was on the Dao, and not or yin and yang. Yin and yang are kind of, because you can't really understand the interplay between those without the Tao. Tao is the principle. It's the way in which nature moves. So in that sense, like, for example, again, I don't know I Ching very well, but I Ching seems to be very focused on the dynamics, the tactics of balancing and working with yin and yang, but not so with Dao De Jing. Dao De Jing is focused on the Tao. So it's like, what principle do you need to follow? And that gives you the clue of how to use those two things. Because without that principle, you have really no thing. Because otherwise, when you say, I need to balance, unless you have a standard, how are you going to balance? So it causes, so the Tao is the critical idea. I categorized all the 81 poems. 20 of them are about the Tao. About 30 of them are about this sage or the proper approach to the Tao. About another 15 to 20 are about the wrong approach that a human being has about the Tao. And I think I found only 3 that were about yin and yang. That was my just kind of quick classification. So it's all about the Tao and how do you relate to the Tao. That's what, as far as I can see, that's my first take on it. Thank you, Rebecca. Next up is Maritza.
Hi, you know, you made the point earlier, Shrikant, that this is actually quite short. So we do have the luxury of looking at it in several different ways. And today I went ahead and I was reading, listening to a version or 2 in Spanish. And so Spanish is my first language. One thing stuck out to me that I just wanted to share here. I'm looking at chapter 2 here. So chapter 2, and I'm gonna read it from, it's actually, this translation here it's one, I just found it online and I kind of like it. It's Derek Lynn, Derek Lynn's translation. And it's more wordy, it's more words, but maybe that's why I like it. And it's, when the world knows beauty as beauty, ugliness arises. When it knows good as good, evil arises. Thus, being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy bring about each other. Long and short reveal each other. High and low support each other. Music and voice harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore, the sages manage the work of detached actions, conduct the teaching of no words. They work with myriad things, but do not control. They create, but do not possess. They act, but do not presume. They succeed, but do not dwell on success. It is because they do not dwell on success that it never goes away. And I love like this one. It says more words, but it's beautiful to me the way it's written here. Something that struck me, the reason I went back into chapter 2 and looked at a whole bunch of different translations is that in an earlier translation that I had read, it talks about the sage doing nothing and teaching without talking. And in Spanish, in the Spanish version I was listening to, the way it's phrased, if I translate it back to English here for you guys, it says, the sage manages his affairs without interfering and teaches without indoctrinating. And that just struck me, that just stood out, like it was a little different. And I love that because it's almost a paradox. You're to manage one's affairs without interfering. So that gave me pause, and I just felt the need to dig into that a little more. And so I was kind of today's rabbit hole was chapter 2 for me, and that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm delighted that you're doing the Spanish version, and please keep sharing your observations as you go on. And I hope you will take up the assignment of actually writing at least some of these yourself, because I think that's where most of the value is, because as you take in, and it's really fascinating to see the variety of translations, because it's almost like commentaries, because I think it has to do, I was talking to a couple of my Chinese friends, and I was asking about, I've never really seen this issue with other translations that I've seen from Greek or Latin or Sanskrit. What I'm finding is that the language itself, firstly, it's very few characters, right? Chinese characters. I think it's the total Dao De Jing is like 5,000 Chinese characters, 5,000 letters, that's it. Okay. Now, each of those characters have the Chinese characters. I'm not a scholar of Chinese, but those are ideograms. So they have tremendous perceptual material in them, and they're very metaphorical. If you look at even the language, it's mostly about physical things that serve as a metaphor for what is going on inside you. And so you have few of those things. Imagine that on the table. So if out of, let's say 100, so it's like 50 characters is all you have per poem, okay? So each of these translators are actually trying to understand it and trying to put it in English. And in so doing, they're actually doing some kind of interpretation, I think, because I find when I read like 8 translations together about one of the poems, it's almost like a ton of commentary about all, just like you pointed out, it's like managing your affairs without interfering. Like one of the persons will capture, like, for example, the quote that I was saying, some people say, people follow Earth. The other people were, Earth sets the standard for people. Or another person would say that Earth is the model for a person. So these are all kind of different, slightly different concepts. And by putting them all together, I think you can get much more richer understanding. And you have to kind of, you can then work on saying what you think is the best thing. So thank you very much. Next up is going to be Jean, Jyoti, and Kevin. Jean.
Yeah, I want to share, I think I heard somebody mention earlier, I think there's a misunderstanding about water as submissive, because actually we learned very early in our age, the drop of water can break the rock with consistency. So water actually is very strong.
Let me just point out one thing, Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah.
Water working.
Yeah, exactly. So I found, myself, actually, I think I need to develop more the yin part. And actually kids help me a lot because being patient, because I actually realized the reason they easily get angry or not patient, because we don't have enough faith. Actually, we have confident faith, then we won't rush to the result because we are not confident about the result. That's why we are rushing to it to make sure it happens. So I think actually yin is more confidence. When you know things will happen eventually, you can be patient, let take a course, let time pass slowly. So I think the kids really teach me to be patient and realize if I really have confidence in things, I don't need to be rushed. So I think it's really helped to balance the yin and yang. But you're very correct about, because I'm going to present later, the two part of the Dao De Jing. Actually, the first part is about the Dao, and the second part is about De. Dao is about the principle, and the De is about how to apply it in life. So you summarize it's very correct. I guess it's from the How to Read the Book.
Well, I don't know whether I'm doing a good job. I don't think I'm still learning. I'm still a baby, you know, on this. I on many things, most things. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Kevin. Jyoti.
Yeah, hi all. You guys have done an excellent job in giving the summary. I'm going to say something in the same lines. I'm very connected to nature, and I watch nature every day. And I feel that as you can't push the nature to produce its miracles before time, it's the same way with you. And like Jen said, you have to be very patient and very balanced in life. And if you do the things in a compassionate and in a balanced way early in your life, and sometimes during your lifetime, it may not happen at the same time. Sometimes during your lifetime, you get rewards which you have not even expected because you had done something in your life before and you forgot about it. But it was going in a very straight line, and it is now putting you in a place which is very comfortable and very spiritual for you. So nature really dictates our life, and you have to connect with the nature in order to figure out where you are going and how you are doing your things. So that's my take, and I think it's a very spiritual way of living life. Tao.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Swanka. Then you mentioned the yin and yang is not here. Actually, it's apply everywhere. They just didn't use that word. If you use the yin and yang word, it's from Yi Jing. But here, if I'm gonna give you from chapter 2, even let's see, Marisa already read. You see the yin and yang. Even here, chapter 22, the first, yield and remain the whole, bend and remain straight, below then and become filled, be worn out then become renewed, have little and receive, have much and confuse, and so on. I want to share something here about life. Life, we need a balance. Though is kind of one of approach. We as Western, we got a large playground, have a seesaw, right? One side, each side. You can imagine that's balanced like seesaw. Yin sits one side, yang sits another side. You have to balance sometime. You keep balance well, your body, your mental, your house get better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Alex. And then we're going to go with the presentation by Jean. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just a reflection on intention. I think, this has kind of already been said, but I mean, me, myself as well, when I think of water being flexible, I think naturally, oh yeah, if I'm flexible, then I will achieve this. Yeah, but I think that's, the whole thing is saying, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. If you want a result out of a situation, then that's not you being flexible. I think, really the challenge for me is letting go of a result, of that hope for success, saying, okay, if I am water, in 50 years time, I'm going to achieve this particular thing. And I think it is really about, Tao is about the way, isn't it? It's about, letting go. I think that's probably the hardest thing for me to kind of, to adjust in myself, saying, okay, maybe it won't work out. That kind of fluidity. That's just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, I think that's the problem with most of us folks in the West, because we always think in those terms as a primary thing. So in that sense, this provides us with a counterbalance to that. Say, okay, do a little bit of listening, not just kind of pushing, but being kind of listening a little bit more. So thank you. So now it's on to Jean. Jean has a presentation. So Jean, take your time. So folks, what we're going to do is that I've deliberately designed this as a kind of multi-pronged way of exploring the topic. At each point, during each of those meetups, everybody will have a chance to express themselves. So it's kind of, you take in stuff and you express stuff. And that's how we learn the fastest, okay? I'm going to have several presentations by several people. And, but don't think, like for Yasuhiko put it very nicely, it says, no, there are no teachers. There are no teachers. It's always between you and God or you and nature. That's all it is, okay? So listen to everybody and speak to everybody and pick up whatever you can, okay? But learn in your own way, okay? So it's on to Jean. Jean, go ahead.
Okay, can you see the screen? Oh,
no, you need to share the screen.
Okay. Okay, can you see now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm honored to be able to share this with all you guys because I'm always interested to learn myself. And I found this is really something that's valuable for everybody. Learning, so we started learning the Dao De Jing. This is 2 different characters about Dao in the history. So they have 2 things. One on the right actually is the head, is a person. On the left means walk. So it's like practice. So I think it's kind of interesting to share this with you. And this photo is the first chapter. 道可道非常道 means the Dao can be named, is not the real Dao. And this is Zhuangzi. So I want to share a story. Actually, it's helped to understanding the 3 religions in China. And there's a very interesting story about the vinegar tasters. I'm not sure if you have heard. And so these 3 guys are tasting vinegars and they have very different expression on their face. And this represents 3 different major religions in China. The one on the left is Confucian. Confucius actually is have very sour look. And the one in the middle is Buddha, is Buddhism. And the Buddha is supposed to have a bitter look. And the one on the right is Lao Tzu, is Daoism. And he's smiling. Basically, they show that the vinegar represents the essence of life. And the way they reacting to it is how they see life as it is. Buddhism think life is bitter, it's all suffering in life. And Confucius think life is sour. They need the rules to correct the degeneration of people and believe the present is always a step. They need to use tradition and reference to our ancestor to restore the order of current, which sounds very similar to today. We always think the past is figured out and the present is all in chaos. And Lao Tzu actually is the only one who thinks the vinegar is sweet. He thinks life, the essence of life is sweet and harmony. And the nature already have all those balance in the nature. We just need to learn from them. So he doesn't believe, tradition will help us. He think if man don't interfere between the nature and heaven, then we can find harmony if we don't put the law of man in between. I think this is a good way to help us to understand. Actually, Buddhism have bigger population in China. Daoism is kind of smaller. If you see the temple in China, there's more Buddhism temple. And Confucius is more the government support kind of religion. And the Daoism actually have 3 pillars in Daoism, and the Dao De Jing is one of them. Then there's I Ching, and also the Huangdi Neijing is inner classic Yellow Empire. It's about the medicine, how the relationship of nature, location, and medicine. I listened to that. It's really fascinating about health, how you gain health through balancing with nature. And I Ching is mathematical thinking. It's quite interesting when you see I Ching has a lot of yin yang astrology and all these things very similar to Western study as well. So it's more complicated mathematical study. So Dao De Jing actually, to simplify it, there's 4 important things teaching in Dao De Jing. The first is simplicity, patience, and compassion. So it's very simple way to achieve the Dao. So which make it seems simple, but it's very hard actually. Just like there's only 5,000 words, I think, in Dao De Jing, but it's the second most translated book in the world after Bible. So, and there's so many translations on each one of them. Second one is going with the flow. So it's nothing is done, nothing is left undone. So going with flow is actually very hard. So you know when is the right time to action, when it's time to relax. Let go, just like we discussed in the current culture, we seems to be busy, you know, we try to achieve everything. We have a hard time to let it go. And the last one, harmony with nature and human environment. Actually, Dao De Jing was created during 战国时期, which is all the countries fighting between each other. So that's why they propose how we, through the, you know, non-interference, let things take the natural course, do nothing. Through that to achieve, restore the order, to let the chaos cease. So it's have its reason to arise at that time, I think. So it's kind of like achieve everything by doing nothing. So sometimes I've actually learned personally, sometimes I want to do something, like I need to cancel this meeting. I said, let's wait. Then the other people cancel it. So I don't even need to do it. I thought it happened multiple times. So I found it really works in real life sometimes. I want to share, this guy actually is a very famous CCTV host called Bai Yansong, his intellect. And he recently actually wrote a book about Dao De Jing, the book of life. And he actually revived the learning in China as well, just recently in March or April. So it's kind of interesting how suddenly both in China and here, we all start to learn Dao De Jing. And I'm actually summarized some of his book to share with you because he has studied it for so many years, since he's 20 years old, about 20, 30 years. So he thinks the Dao De Jing is like Bach music. It looks very simple. The more you study, the more complicated it gets. With 5,000 words, it's most translated book after Bible. And the Dao means integration of knowledge and behavior. So they include 2 sections, Dao and De. Dao means explain the nature, the universal law and principle. Then De means how you practice after knowing this principle. And they mention that nature always has cycle and change, life and death, day and night, seasons. It's all about the change. And also the paradox. I think Frankie in the group mentioned that, you know, the paradox between useful and useless. Lao Tzu mentioned useful and useless, how it's transformed between each other. The difference between useful and useless is very subtle. For example, the cup, you know, it seems the cup, the outside of the cup is useful, but actually the inside of the void is more useful than the cup itself. So Bai mentioned, you know, people ask him, he's very famous host on the CCTV, and ask, you know, what do you do for your life? He said, oh, my main things is reading and relaxing, listen to music, talking to friends, and daydreaming. Then between the time I do some host writing books, so it's just opposite of what people think is useful, because he think what people think is useless, not very important thing, actually is most important for him to be creative and cultivate the imagination, like the downtime we're using. So like me, I joined this philosophy study. A lot of my friends, oh, you're so busy, why you have time to do this? Like you have work, you have kids, you have all this. That's why I need to learn learn how to think, how to learn, how to be efficient. So just like we learn from landmark, the time you use to sharpen your saw is more important than you trying to use your inefficient saw to cutting trees. So we are all sharpening our mind. And he also mentioned the chapter 12 talk about 5 colors will make people blind, 5 sounds will make people deaf, 5 tastes will make people tasteless. Basically talking about how too much information will overwhelm people. Simplicity is the core, which is very, good lesson for us today. Lao Tzu think intelligent people care about content instead of appearance. This also ties back to what form and function. Shirkan shared with us about form and function. So the function is essential. Form, the appearance is less important. So only intelligent people will understand that. Chapter 15 talking about when the water is polluted, what do you do? So all you do is just like this, sit still, then it will be clear. The same for us as well. When we are too busy, we don't think too much. Actually, where our mind is muddled. So maybe the best way for us to calm down, find the essence of life, is to slow down and be quiet. Then just like meditation, then your mind will settle and the water will be clear, your mind will be clear. So when Lao Tzu talk about Wu Wei, or they translate doing nothing, it's actually not doing nothing. It's not very passive. What he means is being peaceful. You have the secure feeling. So then you're doing this continuously and slow moves, search for the harmony in the movement. So just like then they practice Tai Chi, it looks like very slow, and just like the book, Art of Learning, it looks like you're doing nothing, but you can be very powerful, because you use their strength to fight back themselves. And they mentioned about chapter 16. So mentioned if you know the principle how things work, you will become tolerant. The more you know, the more tolerant you will be. And the more tolerant you are, the more chance you'll be fair. The more fair you are, the more chance you'll be a leader. The better you can lead, the more you can combine with the heaven. The heaven follow Tao, follow principle. Once you follow principle to do things, you can do it more permanently and with less danger. That's why we need to read more and understand the Tao. So this teach how to use the Tao to manage the country, you be a leadership, be the leadership. Chapter 23 is about psychology, how to deal with suffering. It's that tornado won't last the whole night, storm won't last a day. Even heaven can't make nature disaster last too long. How about human disaster? So they tell you that whatever difficult or suffering you're experiencing, it won't last forever. So it's great ways for us to face challenges in life. Chapter 41, divide people into different types. The top people learn about Tao, then they practice. The middle tier people, they learn about Tao, practice, but they all feel skeptical about it. And the lower tier people, they learn about it and curse and laugh at it. So I found it quite funny. Chapter 60 mentioned to manage a big country, like cook a small seafood, use Tao to manage. Don't flip too much, open the intestine, then all ghosts will disappear. So it's quite interesting. That means, when you want to change something, you don't change dramatic change because it's very damaging. Just like Jordan Peterson mentioned, the order and chaos. You don't want to flip the whole system. You want to change gradually, slowly. Chapter 66 said the reason river and sea can be the king of all valley and mountains because the river and sea are lower. Whereas people also need to learn to be modest. So this is actually very essential to Asian culture. Like you need to be modest, which doesn't work very well in Western culture right now. So people need to be presenting themselves to get more opportunities. So, but I found a lot of people, like especially people or intellect people, the more they know they don't know. So they become modest. The people who think they know everything, usually the people who hardly know anything or know a little bit. Chapter 81 said the same, don't accumulate things. The more you give to others, the more you will get. The nature law is let everything get its benefit, never hurt others. The Saint's behavior standard is do anything, not compete with others. So they believe the nature is is resourceful. Basically, it's not like I win, you lose. So everybody have their own place in nature, it's harmony. So you don't have to compete with others for nature resource. So this is just summary I put together. Hopefully it's helpful. I'm also learning. I'm really appreciate the opportunity to learn with everybody here. So it's very exciting journey. So let's learn the Dao together. This is Dao.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you, Jean. One request that somebody had put in, I also would, appreciate it a great deal. Could you read one of the poems in Chinese?
Yeah, so let's read the first one.
Go ahead.
So this one, this on the cover. So it's like, 道可道，非常道. Do we need to translate or?
No, you don't need to translate.
Okay.
We just want to hear what it sounds like.
名可名，非常名。无名天地之始，有名万物之母。常无欲，以观其妙；常有欲，以观其徼。于两者同出，而异名同，谓之玄玄，玄之又玄，众妙之门。
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank
All
you.
right. Wonderful, folks. So we can, okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, what we're going to do now is we're going to do the breakout rooms for just about 10-15 minutes. So we have a very different kind of experience. We get to talk about this amongst ourselves, and then we will come back and continue. You can go ahead and ask questions. Okay, this is going to be very tricky. Nobody will have any answers, but the point is to identify the questions. Okay, big questions, and we will work on the questions. We'll try to answer them, but most of the answers are not that important. It's the questions that are important. So please come back with the questions. Okay, I'm starting the breakout rooms now, only for 15 minutes. Then we'll come back. We'll put some questions on the table. I also want to tell you that I'm really getting into this. And as Maritza pointed out, it's a short book. It's a very short book. You can listen to the whole thing in an hour. Okay, and I recommend listening multiple times to multiple translations. Also, I can read it within 2 hours. Okay, and the way I work is that I do this relentlessly. So I will, in this 30 days, I will have read it at least about 30 times minimum. And then I would have listened to it another 30 times or maybe more. And at each point, you're trying to kind of improve your understanding of it. I think this work lends itself to that. And then I will, of course, draw and write and stuff like that in addition to that. So I recommend going through it multiple times. Don't get fixated on saying, okay, what does this actually really mean? Because he's just saying one thing about the whole, about nature of nature and nature of human beings. And that's what you have to get at. And whatever paths you can find, use the paths to get at it. All right. So go ahead. I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. We'll be back here in 15 minutes. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. All right. So let's do questions. Let's not do answers. Let's just do questions. Let's carry the questions with us. So let's try to put questions down, and then we'll have time for more comments. So folks, at this point, just questions. What are the big questions on your mind? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. If you would like to share some questions. Okay, so it's going to be Jyoti followed by Joe. Jyoti.
Yeah, hi. This came up in our breakout rooms. Can you be structured and be flexible at the same time?
Wonderful. So structured and flexible. Very good. Folks, keep track. Use this technology, pen and paper. These questions are very precious. Don't lose them. Just keep track of all the questions as I do, and we will carry them with us today. We will have opportunity of answering it over the next over this month. But let's just let them percolate in our minds, try to come up with answers yourself. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, assuming the video's assertions are correct, and that we are we value the yang aspects of life, how do you then begin to appreciate the yin? How do you get a society to appreciate the yin aspects of life?
Wonderful. How do you get individuals and societies? How about that? Let's put both. Individuals in society appreciate yin part of life. Okay, very good. Anybody else wants to put some questions down? Okay. Before we go to Maritza, I just want to say one thing. I cannot get away from this topic. I'm just completely fascinated by this topic. So tomorrow I was planning to do a meetup on Comprehensivist Wednesday about questions. And I've turned that into the questions just about Dao De Jing and Eastern philosophy and what approach to comprehensivism. This is clearly comprehensivist approach. This is, you're looking at nature as a whole. So it's a very powerful way that we have not actually looked at in the comprehensivist, on Comprehensivist Wednesday. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. So it's going to be all about Taoism and about how Taoism and Eastern philosophy, and I'm going to give you a flavor of other Eastern philosophy that we'll be talking about. How does that provide a comprehensivist approach? So that's going to be tomorrow. So I invite you to come back tomorrow to continue the conversation on Taoism. Next up is going to be questions from Maritza, Mushki, and Kevin. Maritza.
So in chapter 13, we're asked to accept this grace willingly. And in the end, it talks about surrender. So my question is, what does surrender look like?
Wonderful. What does surrender look like? After the questions, one of the things I would like to do is I would like to invite people to read their favorite poem. Okay, so anybody who wants to read a favorite poem can do that after the questions. Next up is going to be Mushki. Mushki, go ahead. What's your question?
My question is, for those of us who fear either the yin or the yang, either the structure or the chaos, how can we overcome our fear so we can accept a little more of the other side, a little more structure into our life, or a little bit more, open up some chaos or room for something new? How can we adapt a whole new personality?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mushki. Next up is going to be Kevin, followed by Mike. Kevin.
Hey, hi, Frank. I got a big question about how do we compare with a Western philosopher. For example, I use the highest virtue is to act without a sense of self. This is from Laozi. In Aristotle, he mentioned that the greatest virtue are those which are most useful to other persons. So my question for folks, how do you compare with Plato, Aristotle, and Nietzsche? Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So how does the concept of virtue in the Western canon compare with that in Dao De Jing?
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Excellent. Next up is going to be Mike.
The question is, how do I maintain flexibility and open-mindedness if I strongly disagree with a person or an idea?
Okay, wonderful. How do you maintain the flexibility in face of strong disagreements, right? Strong disagreements. Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jean.
It seems today we have a lot of challenges like sustainability, environmental, global warming. It seems all because we put the human law over the nature law. And I wonder, if this Daoism is actually going to help us. It's kind of too much yang in the Western culture. I think too much yin in the Eastern culture. That's why I come to America. So it seems the balance is like yin and yang need to mix a little bit.
Thank you. What's your question?
The question is, do you think the Daoism can help with global warming?
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Warming, excellent. Laura had a question. Laura, you want to speak out your question? Or let me, I'll read it for you. So it says, what if nature around you is a burned forest? How can you get
to a place of beauty?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. All right, next up, let's see here. Okay, so these are the questions, and let me just repeat the questions. So I'll go backwards. Is that if the nature around you is a burned forest, how do you get to the place of beauty? How do you stop global warming using the Tao? How do you maintain flexibility when, that's my question, how do you maintain flexibility when you're faced with a situation which you strongly dislike and disagree about? Kevin's question was, how does conception of virtue in Aristotle or Plato or Nietzsche compare to the notion of virtue in Lao Tzu? Mushki asks, how can we overcome if we are focused only on one part of the yin or yang? How do we overcome the fear of the other part to incorporate some of that into your life, into our lives? Maritza asks, what does surrender look like? The surrender that that Lao Tzu talks about. What does it look like? Joe asks, in the Western culture, which is dominated by yang, how do you get individuals or society to appreciate the yin aspect? And Jyoti asked, how do you have a life which is structured and flexible? Alex, you had a question. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm not sure if this is too big, but what is the ultimate goal? Is it happiness? Is it personal happiness? Is it the happiness of everyone? Is it morality? Is it saving the world? Is it, what's the whole purpose? I'm asking about the meaning of life.
Okay,
So that's too big.
No question is too big. The better the question, the better. Okay, so this is great. So what is the purpose of all of this? Wonderful. All right, so we have great questions. And what I want to do is I'm going to encourage you to read out your favorite poems, okay? But I want to give you an example from the Indian culture. This is kind of the start for tomorrow. I've chosen something from the Indian culture, which is actually not really from the Indian culture. This is the first book of poems that really spoke to me. This is by Rabindranath Tagore. It's called Gitanjali. It was written around 1912, 1913. It was the first book, I think first book to get a Nobel Prize outside of the Western world. If I remember right, maybe there was another one, I don't know, but it's one of the first, either the first or the second one to get. Again, it's just 53 short poems. It's much shorter than Dao De Jing, okay? And its feel is the same. It's the Tao and it's you. And it's basically the equation between that. And he speaks in a way, he calls Tao the God or Lord. It's same as nature. And then it's him. So I'm just going to read 4 short poems to give you a flavor of what it is like. And after that, I encourage anybody who wants to read any of the poems from Dao De Jing that you like, okay? So here goes. Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. This frail vessel thou emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with fresh life. This little flute of reed Thou hast carried over hills and dales and hast breathed through it melodies eternally new. At the immortal touch of thy hands, my little heart loses its limits in joy and gives birth to utterances ineffable. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest, and still there is room to fill. I know not how thou singest, my master. I ever listen in silent amazement. The light of thy music illuminates the world. The life breath of thy music runs from sky to sky. The holy stream of thy music breaks through all stony obstacles and rushes on. My heart longs to join in thy song, but vainly struggles for a voice. I would speak, but speech breaks not into song, and I cry out baffled. Ah, thou hast made my heart captive in the endless meshes of thy music, my master. My song has put off her adornments. She has no pride of dress and decoration. Ornaments would mar our union. They would come between thee and me. Their jingling would drown out thy whispers. My poet's vanity dies in shame before thy sight. O master poet, I have sat down at thy feet. Only let me make my life simple and straight, like a flute of reed for thee to fill with music. The child who is decked with princess robes and has jeweled chains round his neck loses all pleasure in his play. His dress hampers him at every step. In fear that it may be frayed or stained with dust, he keeps himself from the world and is afraid even to move. Mother, it is no gain thy bondage of finery, if it keeps one shut off from the healthful dust of the earth, if it rob one of one's right of entrance to the great fair of common human life. So this is Gitanjali from Rabindranath Tagore, right? So this is an Indian version of these thoughts. So now I want to, if anybody wants to share any of the poems, they're welcome to do that. Or if you just want to have any last thoughts about this. If you want to speak, just go ahead and type an exclamation mark. All right. Okay, let's do one thing. So we will continue this tomorrow. Tomorrow the theme would be Daoism and comprehensivism. You know, how do you access everything using this? Using the Daoism and other Eastern philosophies. Mushki, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm pretty much just discovering this Taoism now, but I saw a poem online that I really like, short, I can read it.
Please.
He who stands on tiptoe doesn't stand firm. He who rushes ahead doesn't go far. He who tries to shine dims his own light. He who defines himself can't know who he really is. He who has power over others can't empower himself. He who clings to his work will create nothing that endures. If you want to accord with the Tao, Just do your job and then let go.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mushki. I also want to say that I read, Wayne Dyer's translation. Not only the translation is good, but he has this entire book that Mike and Brian recommended, and which I also recommend because I like the translation. I like the entire process that he has. And then he talks about each of the chapter. I've not read the book. I've just read his translation. So I would recommend that as well. And all right, so with that, good night, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.